inventory, your big book. I don't necessarily need to read from it. I just like having one. It's kind of like a talisman. My name's Rick. I'm a member of Alcoholics Anonymous.
Hi, Rick.
There is my clock in here. I try to look at the clock so okay, good. Whenever I talk in a meeting, whether it's just my home group or whatever, just because I heard once that Dr. Bob used to tell Bill that anybody talks for more than 3 or 5 minutes is just fascinated with the sound of their own voice. So I try to keep track of the time. But sometimes I'm so fascinated with myself that I just get carried away. I have a good life. I have more than I could say grace over. I've known a wealth of humanity in Alcoholics Anonymous. I come from just, I'm garden variety Maple Valley drunk, house parties, kegers, fights, whatnot, cheating, lying, wrecking cars. I think I had 3 DUIs, 4 if you count car accidents. But I had several other criminal endeavors. Nothing spectacular, nothing that could put me in jail forever. But I'd have done more time than I did. But I was in and out of jail and in and out of trouble growing up. No particular reason. I just was. It's what appealed to me: the fast life, the easy life. And when I was about 12, 13, I had a few drinks with some friends. Of course, we stole the beer we'd hidden it during a party the night before and went and got it the next day and got drunk. And his mom had us say the Lord's Prayer. She made us memorize the Lord's Prayer. She was very religious. But she didn't tell my folks. And my dad's a wonderful man. He would go to the store for a pack of cigarettes and come home 2 or 3 hours later smelling a beer. He was just a nice, friendly guy. He's the kind of guy that deserved to have a son that he could go have a beer with and shoot a game of pool. Unfortunately, I wasn't that kind of guy. I embraced everything that the 70s offered. Psychedelics were a favorite of mine. When I was 13, I got shot in the eye with a BB gun and wore a black patch over my eye through high school.
Wow.
And, mostly just because I was self-conscious about the way I looked. I was looking over here and I'm looking this way. Had a few surgeries since then, so that's changed. But I compare my insides to other people's outsides and make assumptions about them. And for some reason, I feel compelled to tell you that I'm mostly just the entertainment here tonight. Something to give you something to laugh about every once in a while. If anything I say is inconsistent with what you read in this book or know about the fellowship, go with that. Talk to your sponsor. Yeah. This is my friend Tie-Dye Rick. There was a number of Ricks for a while in our area and developed nicknames. I always thought Maple Valley Rick was kind of boring, but I spiced it up a little bit over the years with a few well-known tales, but I don't know if you need to hear about those or not. I was hitchhiking across the country, back and forth a few times, up and down the coast. In '74, I came home, and a friend of mine had taken a car end over end off that sharp corner on the Lake Wilderness Golf Club, where Lake Wilderness Golf Club used to be, and ended up paralyzed. And in solidarity with his wishes, I went to the Harborview and used to blow him nose hits because he couldn't do it for himself. You got to stay solid with your friends.
Yeah.
I didn't recognize how selfish that was or how foolish it was at the time. It's what I knew. Long story short is this kind of stuff went on, and I hit a bottom, hit a crisis. And there was a thing called Maple Valley Days. Every town has its town drunk weekend, and that was Maple Valley. And I got in a beef with the cops over they were trying to arrest these two gals I knew. And they had slipped me their bag of pot. So the long story short is I got arrested. And I had this on me, and a friend of my dad's talked the cop out of it. I mean, everybody knew everybody, you know. And the cop let me go, and I slipped the cop. So I was afraid. I got that paranoia going. And I was working on a substation, power line substation down in Centralia. That's when they were building the coal-fired plant down in Centralia. And was living on a place over on Kitsap Peninsula, and my sister's boyfriend used to fly pot in by the bundle, and me and his brother kind of took care of the place. But I was still working, and at that time I thought that was kind of the height of right on. That's the way a guy ought to live, doing stuff like that, getting over on the man kind of thing. And the truth is that if anything had happened, me and his brother would have taken the fall. We'd have, the dumbasses had gone to prison. Anyways, I snapped, I ran, I had a brand new truck, and one morning I went out to go to work and I saw this mushroom. I thought, that's psilocybin. I started following mushrooms around the yard and forgot to go to work and left that truck. You know how you start a new vehicle up and the engine roars? Well, I had walked far enough away I didn't know, and it didn't do any favors to that truck. But actually, after I stayed sober for a while, I gave that truck to my dad because in amends for having totaled, I think, two of his vehicles. I rolled one upside down one night and trashed another one. But my family, I went back to my dad's house after driving this truck around the state. I was afraid. I thought people were out to get me. And I drove it back to my dad's house, and they tried to calm me down, and they couldn't. And so they took me to Valley General Hospital, the psych unit there. And my older sister, who had a lot of trouble in her own right, talked me into staying there, and they kept me there for 2 weeks. And they said, towards the end, you're definitely insane. We feel it's due to drugs and alcohol. And they offered me a slot in Western State or this treatment center up in Monroe. It was based on the Hazelden program. And I went up there because I knew what Western State was. I'd visited an acid casualty buddy of mine there. And I went to Monroe, Soberg Hall, I think they called it. Valley General Hospital up there too. Anyways, I spent a week in the dry out ward doing a little bit of the Diane Salmon routine. That's where you fall on the floor and start flip-flopping around through alcoholic seizures. I drank a lot. I did all kinds of drugs. I didn't even need to know what it was. I didn't have any caution about it, I remember somebody selling this stuff they said was mescaline, but it was, you'd lick your finger and stick it in the baggie full of powder, and that was yours. It was not exactly correct dosage, and I started having blackouts frequently. But anyways, I got out of the dry out, the detox ward, and I did 36 days in a 28-day program. And I remember people said, it's just a day at a time. If you don't take the first drink, you don't get drunk. A lot of people talked to me because I was younger than most of the people there. And I think they patted me on the head for good luck, like something like that. But people were good to me. I had this roommate who worked for the railroad. He lived in Wenatchee. And the railroad tracks past this treatment center went to Wenatchee. I knew that. And he got released, and I had this self-centered crisis, One thing before that, the first AA meeting I ever went to was in that treatment center. And they asked me to read how it works, and I blubbered all the way through it. But that wasn't particularly unusual because I was crying about everything. Mostly, because the world and its people treated me wrong. And I wasn't getting what I wanted. And I want what I want when I want it. And so one afternoon, I had a roommate, and he was a fifth a day drinker, and he died. His heart couldn't take it. And so the next day I went out the back door and started walking these tracks to Wenatchee. This guy brought me back and talked to me on the back step of this place and said I was adamant that I was leaving, I was gone. And he said, well, he says, if you go, he said, do you suppose you'll drink? And I said, no, I'm not going to drink because I knew that was bad juju. And he said, do you suppose you'll do psychedelics? I said, probably not. And he asked me about pot, and I was far more equivocal about that. And he said, do you suppose you'll see your friends? And I said, yeah, well, sure. He said, do you suppose your friends will notice you're not your best self? And I said, yeah, they will. He said, what do you suppose they'll have to offer you? And I knew instantly what he meant. He meant that my friends would offer to get me drunk, high, loaded, in whatever way possible. And he said, yeah, that's right. And he said, I want you to understand it's not because they're bad people or they hate you. It's because that's the only answer they have for what they're dealing with, If the only tool you have is a hammer, all your problems start looking like nails. I met a guy from Maple Valley, Charlie. And Charlie was a speaker up there. He'd been in that place for a year earlier. And I listened to him speak, and then I went back to my room, and somebody ratted me out, told Charlie I was from Maple Valley. Charlie came back and talked to me. He gave me his phone number, and more importantly, he got mine. Because when I got out, he called me. I never would have called him, not in a million years. It never would have occurred to me to call him. But he took me to a meeting that night, and that meeting was at a place called Cedar Hills. It was a treatment center out that way. It was a long-term treatment center. It was people went there to spend 3 to 6 months there. And it was mostly, a lot of them were wet brains, people who drank past the point of coming back. And we used to go to that was on Monday. I forget where the main Cedar Hills meeting was, but there was one meeting in Maple Valley at the library. And Charlie took me to that meeting. It was Wednesday night, and I remember somebody said, let us love you till you can love yourself. And they weren't, I just remember they weren't the first person I'd heard say that. Would they be the last? But they're the person who said it when I was ready to hear it. There's moments of clarity is what the book talks about. And I read one time that one of the dictionary definitions of sobriety is clarity, clearness of thought. And that makes sense to me. Whether it's true or not doesn't really seem to matter. It works for me. And I started going to meetings. And by the grace of God, I loved meetings. I always loved people's stories, I mean, yeah, I probably, my stories have probably changed over the year. The same stories, probably a little different, if not a whole lot different. I know I'm the hero in far more of them than I deserve to be. But I went to a lot of meetings. I became a part of the Serenity Hall group when Serenity Hall was in the corner of 3rd and Wells in downtown Renton, just off the Renton Loop. And I know that we had a kid come to our meeting. He said, all the kids in Renton think that you're spying, ratting them out to the cops. Because we'd sit in the window and watch them go by, and I did that loop I don't know how many times. That black patch over my left eye saved me from going in the military. I got in way too many fights. I don't think I ever started one in my life, but I didn't have enough good sense to walk away. And I tried to join the military, I think 6 times between the time I was 16 and I got sober. I didn't try to join after I got sober, but they wouldn't take me because I was blind in one eye. I even volunteered to go to Nam, but God bless those who did. Um, the world was a different place in the 70s. I missed the great boom in cocaine, thank God. And that's cheap cocaine. It was around before. Um, I'll tell you, the night before I went in the mental ward, the day before I went in the mental ward, my dad gave me a ride down to Portland, and I interviewed for a power lineman's apprenticeship course in outside construction. These are contractors who go build power lines for people here and there. And I got the papers that I'd been accepted in the apprenticeship program probably a week and a half, 2 weeks before I got out of the hospital in early August. I had my last drink in June 10th, but that's not my birthday because when I was in treatment, you could score drugs in treatment. I don't know if anybody's aware of that shot. You can, and I did. And I chose July 6th as my birthday because I know the last time I used was after the 4th of July, but I'm not sure exactly what day, but 7676 was easy to remember. That's 47 years ago as of last Thursday, 2 days ago. And let's see, where do I go? I'll tell you about Greg. This guy named Greg R. I knew his dad, Vic, from Serenity Hall, and Greg asked me to be a sponsor at the second meeting he went to. And is this mine? It better be. Yeah. Nothing against you. Greg asked me to be a sponsor, and I talked to him a lot, and I offered him what I had to offer, which was my friendship. And, you know, I knew where the bathrooms were in the meetings, and I knew where the meetings were, and I knew some of the places people went to coffee and such. But I didn't really know how to work the steps. You know, I knew if you talked about it, you ought to know what you're talking about. But after about a year, Greg asked me, he said he wanted to do a fourth and a fifth step. And I told him basically that I don't really know how to do one, and you might want to find somebody who had. And there was this guy in Maple Valley area at the time named Taylor, who Greg had gotten for a sponsor. And I was over working in Idaho on a power line for about 2.5 months. And I came back and I saw Greg, and he was, as we say, inwardly rearranged. He was different in that way that I didn't see the selfish, self-centered jerk I'd already known. Now, he's changed back to that person many times since, but at the time I wanted what he had, and I didn't want what I had. I was living like a drunk sober. Taylor used to give me a hard time about dating women in AA, and insisted that I shouldn't, and that didn't really appeal to me, so I didn't ask for his help. But when Greg changed, and I knew I needed to change because I was living like a drunk sober, I asked Taylor. The Maple Valley group had started a Friday night step study meeting out of the 12 and 12. And I talked to Taylor after the meeting and was saying this and that, and he says, you know, if you're trying to ask me to be your sponsor, you need to ask me, because someday I'm going to have to remind you that you asked me for help and not the other way around. And he said, I think it was 3 requirements, you know, that 1, you go to meetings, 2, you work the steps, and 3, that you be willing to talk about whatever's going on in your life and don't make me chase you down and hold, beg you to say it because I'm not going to do it. I'm not any good at it. And Taylor, as I said earlier, was the guy who said a lot of the things that that I'd heard 100 times before, but he was the person who said them when I was able to hear them. And he talked to me about the first 3 steps and talked to me about the fact that the way I did them was 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, the AA waltz. Had that big, powerful sense of, I got to make this change, come to believe that this program works, and then have that grand hallelujah moment, and then go back, tumble backwards, and go through it all over again. And he said, he talked to me about taking a 4th step, and kept it simple. He said, just write your life story in an outline form. Take it 5 years apart at a time because it'll be easier for your. I forget how he said it, but it was insulting. For you to do. He said the big book's the format I want you to follow. But I had trouble with the writing, and he said just pray about it. And the answer will come. Pray for the willingness. And by God, it did. It came one night I was doing that, and I started writing, and it just came like a flood. And all I could see was the self-centered jerk I'd always been and probably would always be. That's what scared me. How much time do we have left?
8 minutes.
Oh, we better get sober. I hate meetings where the person talks about drinking the whole time. I don't hate them. I enjoy them, actually, but I think they're more productive if you talk about how you work the steps. So anyways, I did a 4th and then I did a 5th. And it changed my life. I had done something that I respected. I left no stone unturned. I told him everything I could think of. And then I promptly went on a world tour of Alcoholics Anonymous, telling everybody what a grand job I'd done doing a 4th and a 5th step. And, if you don't do one, you probably die drunk. And you should be like me, that kind of thing. And I got a gal friend, and I think we were living down by Forest Grove by 6 months, a year later. And that whole relationship blew up, and I didn't want it to. But I followed a pair of brown eyes out of a meeting, and it went sideways. And I've been going to a lot of meetings, and I talked to different people, and they talked to me about EST and psychiatrists and books and cyber cybernetics. And I made the mistake of calling Taylor and telling him, that I hadn't done this and I hadn't done that right, and 6 and 7 were beyond me. And he said, you keep going the way you're going, you're going to go out this program backwards. The idea is to go forward. And if you want to stay sober, he said, we did most of your 5th step, or most of your 8th step when we did your 5th step. He had me write the names of various people, and, what the focus of the amends ought to be when I did it. And so with his help, I went and started doing my amends. And the first ones were the easy ones, and those were the financial ones. I went to this guy that me and a buddy of mine used to shoplift his business out there, steal quite a bit of stuff from him. And I went to him and told him what I'd done. And he said, well, he already knew. And I told him what I wanted to do. And he said, well, that's not really necessary. And I said, well, it may not be for you, but it is for me. So I made a payment plan. It was $20 a week, which isn't a great amount, but it was more then. And I soon discovered that I didn't like facing this guy. I didn't like seeing him and making these payments, and that I had to pray for the strength to do it repeatedly. And it worked. And oddly enough, this guy's not stepfather, it's his father-in-law, was a member of the fellowship, and I knew him quite well. And so I did that one, and a host of other ones. I didn't go around paying back the drug dealers that I owed money to or anything like that. I was absolved by those of my sponsor. And the tough ones were my parents. I'd taken a hard line with them and just used them because they let me. And I lost respect for my father, and I didn't treat him well. And the first one I talked to was my mother, and I had to ask them for, just please listen to what I say. I warned them what I was going to do, that I was going to talk to them about some serious stuff and try to create some clarity between us. And I finished with my mother, and I was told that when you make amends, you say what you got to say, talk to the other person, tell them what you want to do about it, and then ask them if there's anything you've left out, if there's anything, that I haven't mentioned or that I owe you, and then shut up and listen, which is incredibly hard for me to do. And probably not you guys, you're probably better at it than I. But I did, and my mom told me something. She says, all I really want from you, Rick, is that you don't leave me worrying and praying for God that you're not in some ditch somewhere. Because on my 21st birthday, she cited this. I came home. I got in my first bar fight on my 21st birthday over a young lady. And this guy invited me outside, and as I was walking through the door, he clipped me behind the head back here somewhere. I swear to God, he was putting the boots to me before I hit the ground. And I had a black eye that went from here to here, and chipped tooth and whatnot. And I woke up on my folks' couch, and she said, I just don't want to worry about you coming home that way. And by the grace of God and the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous, I haven't put her through that anymore. Now, my father was a little different matter. I told him that, and he kept waving me off, like, you're my son, I love you, and, it's just the way of the world. And my commitment was to treat him with respect and love wherever I could, at every angle I could. He never did me any harm. My dad always told me the truth. If it wasn't for him, I wouldn't have gotten to the line trade. And how much time I got left? Am I running out of time?
2 minutes.
2 minutes. Oh, 45 years. 40-some. Let's see. That gal that I was seeing when I started making my amends, I ended up marrying her. We were married for 19 years. We were together for 19 years. We were married for 17. We got divorced in 2000. We had 3 wonderful kids, 2 of whom are members of this fellowship. One's not really an active member right now. One has returned to us and seems to be doing well. And I tried my best not to tell them what they have to do, to give them the space where they can listen, where I can listen to them. And it seems to be helping. If nothing else, it helps me cope with it. And, I've had the blessing to have a lot of great things going on in my life. I took up lineman's rodeos in the early 90s, and I won the Northwest Speed Climbing Contest. And I just want to brag for a few minutes. I was a union rep for my union. I was an organizer, first organizer in my union for 50 years. And I had a great time doing it. I was elected president of my union local. And did that for 20 years. I was elected 6 consecutive terms until I resigned a couple years ago. And oddly enough, within the labor movement, I know a lot of people in AA. A lot of the leadership of the labor movement is, I think, people making things right. People who want this world to be a better place, but also paying back for the opportunities they were given. I married I got a job at Puget Sound Energy. I got a serviceman's position up in Port Townsend 20 some years ago. And Lara, I don't know if you remember this, but you told me where the Alano Club was. It said it's right across from the street from Swain's. You just looked up in the window and that symbol was there. I got a good life. I got more, I could say grace over. I've been married for 10 years in August. My wife's one of us, but she doesn't practice the program and she's still drinking and does not want to stop drinking. And I love her. And that's tough at times. And I blame her at times. But it's not the way it works. She's a wonderful person. And let's see. Something I wanted to wrap up with. It was really good too. It made you cry. Oh, I know what it is. I know what it is. In the 12 and 12, at the end of step 3, it says, God grant me the serenity to accept the things that I cannot change. At the end of step 12, it says, God grant us the serenity to accept the things we cannot change. It's a journey from me to we is the path of the 12 steps. It's my understanding of it. And I really think that's a beautiful, and it took me years before I noticed it. I had a sponsor who used to run a Tuesday afternoon, Saturday, not a Tuesday, 2:00 Saturday meeting at Serenity Hall. And when he got drunk, I inherited that meeting. And it was a lot of fun. I learned a lot about the big book. I'll say it, Harry got drunk and he never sobered up. He was the most well-read man I've ever known in my life, but he couldn't stop drinking. Loved his Jack Daniels. And what did I want to say about Harry? Oh yeah, when Harry was drinking, I was dragging everybody I could out to visit him and convince him to stop drinking. And one afternoon I was the literature chair and I had to go to Seattle Intergroup and I was talking to Little Al. Somebody here must know Little Al. He was the chair of Seattle Intergroup. And he said, Rick, he said, if somebody's ready, you can't say nothing wrong. And if they ain't, you can't say nothing right. So hopefully I said something right.
Thank you.